everyone, Nick Juskewycz here with Daily Fantasy Winners. Got another episode of Tee to Green here for you. This week is the Arnold Palmer Invitational down in Orlando at Bay Hill. Three things before we get into the specifics of the golf course. First thing this week is just about the daily fantasy competition, I think, for this week. This is the beginning of March Madness this week, and this is one of the, the best sports times of the year for the casual sports fan, including myself. I love March Madness. I'm definitely involved with it. But at the same time, a lot of people that are just general sports fans are going to be probably more focused on doing stuff March Madness related. And I say that in just that I think the average daily fantasy player in a typical GPP or cash game is going to be a little bit better than normal. I think there's going to be more sharks, I guess, if you will, or more pros than there will be just your average daily fantasy player just throwing a couple lineups in. Not going to say it's going to be completely disproportional or something like crazy, but just keep an eye out. If you're new to daily fantasy, I'm not telling you not to play this week. I'm just saying you may want to maybe limit how much you play, or maybe just do one or two GPP lineups in small stakes, something like that. So just wanted to say that, just something to watch out for, something I've noticed, and that goes for all sports this time of year. When March Madness and everyone at their office pools doing brackets, that's just kind of what everybody's into. Quite catches their attention. Second thing is the PGA Tour field this week at the Arnold Palmer Invitational. This is traditionally one of the best fields of the year that's not a major or WGC event. Unfortunately, this year it's not as good as it usually is. It's definitely better than what the Valspar was last week, and that was crazy. But this year for Arnold's tournament in particular is not as good. The main reason for this is because of the way the schedule worked out, and most of the time the schedule stays the same. However, the WGC match play has been getting moved around quite a bit the last couple of years, and the match play is next week. And the reason, and that's over in Texas, and then the Houston tournament is right after that, and then we got the Masters afterward. And usually players do not want to play a lot of consecutive weeks leading up to the Masters. They'll be worn out, and they want to get the proper reps in before they go over to Augusta. So unfortunately, most people, I think, are prioritizing the match play, and they're not doing this tournament. Now, this still has Rory McIlroy, Adam Scott, Jason Day, Justin Rose, all those guys, Henrik Stenson. But at the same time, the depth is not there, and we see a lot of $7,000, $6,000, even upper $5,000 level golfers this week. So this will be, we'll definitely have to prioritize our attention a little bit as far as the lower level golfers again, and because there's not that many from $11,000, $10,000, even $9,000 level golfers, so the ownership of those guys are going to be pretty high, just in generally speaking. Because the third point, this leads into my third point, is usually there's about 140 and 150 golfers in a tournament. There's only about 120 this week because this is an invite, but we're still going to have a cut after Friday with top 70 plus ties. So instead of eliminating roughly 50% of the field, we are going to be eliminating only about 30 or what would it be, 120, 40 to 50 players. So it would not be as much. So we could be a little bit more aggressive with our picks, but because we can go a little bit more high-low, and there's not that many high-level golfers to choose from, we're just going to see ownership in general for the more expensive golfers pretty high. So really it's going to come down to more how we choose with the cheaper players, in the $6,000 range. Okay, so those are the 3 points before I want to get to. Now to the specifics of Bay Hill. It is down in Orlando, like I said. This is the last tournament as part of the Florida Swing. We've got the Players' Championship later on in May that will be back in Florida temporarily. But this is the end of the Florida Swing before we go to the match play. Like I said, this is a par 72. It tips out 7,419 yards. This course went through a course redesign. I believe it was in 2009. It was a very good course redesign back then. But secondly, I also want to point out is that they have new greens this year. As soon as the Arnold Palmer invite ended last year, they redid the greens. So where I'm coming from on this and what I'm saying is I do not think course history matters much here. I really wouldn't even look at it very much. Maybe if you see somebody has done extremely well here and they're not that great of a golfer, and they're like a good Florida player in general. I'd much more rather focus on good Florida players here in particular, as opposed to just somebody who's done well here in the past, a.k.a. Matt Every, who's won here the last 2 years. Way overpriced. I would not go with him this week. Has been not playing very well this year. Okay, so what else can we find out about this golf course? There is a lot of water on this golf course, like any other Florida course. This is obviously no exception. This course is, it might seem long at 7,419 yards, but with it being a par 72, and just the way the course plays, it is actually not quite that long. It is not a Bombers course. Right here, what I have shown on the screen right here is the leaderboard from 2015, and it's just anybody who's finished top 20 last year, and you can go back to the previous leaderboards and check this out, but for the most part, you're going to see more of the guys that are keep hitting the ball in play as opposed to the long bombers. Now, you do see a few long bombers on here, like Rory finished tied for 11th. Jason Day is in there tied for 17th. But if you take a look at this, Matt Every, shorter hitter, Henrik Stenson, kind of middle of the road, but very accurate, hit the ball really well that week, I remember. Ben Martin's a shorter hitter. Kevin Na, Zach Johnson are definitely more the shorter hitters and more focused on accuracy and ball striking. David Lingmerth is a little on the shorter range. Snedeker's kind of middle of the road. Danny Lee's middle of the road, and Francesco Molinari's even on the shorter end. So you see a lot of guys that are more in the accuracy department. There are not there are a fair amount of long iron shots. And where I'm coming from on this now is actually what I more should direct this to, is that you get a very wide variety of shots on this golf course. Arnold did a great job designing this course in the sense that you use pretty much every club in the bag. So I had read and seen a couple things out there that they're really trying to focus on approaches from like a certain distance. I would not worry about that. I'm just worried about proximity to the hole in general. How are you playing well as of late? And keeping the ball in play, of course, is good because there are a lot of penalty strokes out there. There are a ton of them out there. The golf course itself, let's pull up the course here. There are 4 par 5s on this course, and we'll dive into them really quickly here. This is hole number 4 at 561 yards. We're going to see, we can probably count on one hand how many eagles you're going to get on this hole. It's about 5. 561 yards, not the longest hole in the world, but the bunkers are very well protect this green. It is not a big green, and it's not that easy to hit in 2. This is a hole that you will need a longer hitter for to get an eagle, but again, you're not going to get that many, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. Next hole is hole 6. This is arguably the most iconic hole on the course. I think it's the best hole in the course. It's basically a U, and you can't just drive it straight over the water. It's way too far to carry. And so it's basically a big swooping dog leg left. There is, with the water all along the left-hand side. And this is a very fun hole to watch. If there's like a couple holes that get you excited, this is definitely one of them. It produces some eagles. It's usually not that many, actually. It's about 5 or 6, because going for this pin and this green is very dangerous. However, as we've seen some eagles, and we'll see several birdies here, we'll also see a lot of snowmen in big numbers here as well. It's a fun hole and a kind of a do-or-die hole, so to speak. All right, move on to hole 12. Third par 5, 574 yards. This is probably the longest par 5 on the course and the one you'll see the fewest eagles on. This is very well protected by bunkers, and this is a kind of a tough green to hit anything close to if you're attacking it from a long distance. You're going to see a lot of players lay up on this hole, but again, some of the longer hitters will go for it. Probably get a few eagles here, just not many. We haven't seen very many here over the last few years. Hole 16, this is an eagle hole for everyone. Any hit driver, pretty easy driving hole. There's a creek that runs right in front of the green. It is a double tier green, back to front. And, this is just mostly about can you hit it on the right tier of the green and you'll get a chance at it. I think we saw like 30 eagles here last year. There's a lot of them, but anybody can. So what does all this mean as we're looking towards stats? There are going to be about a dozen eagles probably on the first 3 holes, and it'll be mainly for the longer hitters, but that's going to be there's going to be a little bit more luck than that than anything. It's not like we see 15 to 20 eagles on each hole, and only the longer hitters can get there. When we have a bunch of eagle opportunities for all the distance hitters on 16, and there's only like a few out there per hole on the others, I wouldn't worry about the bombers too much on this course. I really want guys that are, again, like I said, hitting the fairway, good proximity to the hole, things of that nature. I'm not saying you need to avoid the bombers like Rory or Jason or anything like that. You can definitely use them. I just wouldn't focus on that and use that as a primary form of reasoning. To the specific stats we're looking for, strokes gained tee to green, standard procedure, birdie or better percentage. I do think aggressive play is going to be rewarded here. However, having said that, there you have to be has to be relatively smart as well because there are a lot of hazards out there. But nevertheless, a good pin attacking will pay off here in aggressive play, especially when we can be a little bit more aggressive with our picks. Like I said, when not as many players are missing the cut. Driving accuracy is always good. Proximity to the hole, like I said, I wouldn't worry so much about approaches from certain distances this week. I'm looking for pretty much all distances here, and I think sometimes you have to be careful. Also, I'll just say this with the distances. I kind of like taking, if I see a lot of wedge shots or short irons out there, I want to see just kind of everything from 50 to 150 and see if I see some consistency. Because if you focus on just one small range, like just from 75 to 100, or even just from 100 to 150, let's say, I think because that stat can be flawed a lot of the time in terms of how many golf tournaments have you played, and which courses did you play, and how many shots have you actually hit in that distance, and how many shots maybe did you just hit that were just outside of that range when you could be hitting arguably the same club per se. So you don't want to limit yourself too much. Sometimes when I do say you kind of want to focus on a certain range, I try and focus on maybe like a 75-yard window, so to speak. But in this case, I see every club in the bag being hit here. I wouldn't worry about a specific distance, like I said. After proximity to the hole, though, in general, going for the green percentage and going for the green hit percentage. All right, we got a little bit of a new stat. Now that we got some more data, I kind of wanted to bring it in, and this is a good tournament to do it. This will be a little bit more for the longer hitters if you do want to put one in for like a GPP. But when you look this up on PGAtour.com, and there's going for the green percentage and going for the green hit percentage. Going for the green percentage is when you have the opportunity to drive the green, like a short par 4, when you have the opportunity to drive the green, or if you have an opportunity to go for the green in 2 on a par 5, how often do you go for it? It doesn't matter about hitting it, just how often do you go for it? And then the second one is the hitting percentage, is how often do you actually hit the green when you go for it? So you want to take kind of two measuring sticks is basically, okay, how often do they like to go for in terms of being aggressive, and then how successful are they usually in doing so? And you want to use both of those kind of together to get a good feel. We still don't really have enough data for me to like absolutely love this statistic yet. We want to wait a little bit later into the field, but it's a good time to introduce it just for something to keep an eye on. Like Adam Scott's really good in both departments. I think he's top 10 in both, believing in because he's an aggressive player. He likes going for the green, but he's also really good at it as well. And obviously Adam Scott's been playing very well as of late. We want guys that are obviously, of course, playing well as of late, or in good form, and then we want good Florida players in general. I wouldn't worry so much about course history here, just because this course went through the redesign back in 2009, and I'm just overall not that worried about it in the sense that I don't see this isn't one of those courses that are really quirky. That's going to mean you really need to play here to really know the track well. They actually changed some of the bunkers around in 2009 and removed some of the blind shots, actually, with some of the mounds that even made it a little bit more friendly for the person who was actually playing there maybe for the first or second time, and I think that makes it better. I'm not the biggest fan of a bunch of blind shots anyways, so I think that's good just for everyone in general. So good Florida players. Wouldn't worry too much about course history unless somebody has an incredible history here who's maybe not that great of a golfer but's made the cut like 95% of the time or something like that. Okay, that's it for the stats and kind of what we're focusing on for the players. The last thing before we get into the picks is there is a small chance of rain Thursday night. I'm recording this Tuesday night right now, so we'll check in with this in about 24 hours, but on Wednesday night, and we'll talk about it in the forum. But on Tuesday night, as I record this, there is a small chance of rain Thursday night, and then there's also a better chance of rain, like 50-60% later in the day on Friday or later Friday night. Again, like I said, we'll look into it more tomorrow evening and seeing if maybe there's a tee time wave that will be a little advantageous. And maybe that'll help. There's been a lot of wind issues in the Florida tournaments as of late that's made the courses play a little bit more difficult. Don't see too much wind this week that will interfere with that, but if we can get some softer greens out there with the rain, we may want to take a tee time wave that will give us an advantage on that. Okay, into the picks. Same thing as before. Going to give you my A list on here, and then we will have the B list as far as maybe more GPP guys, or maybe some guys that I could see doing really well, just not a top play for me. That'll be over on the forum. And with that, here is my A list and my top plays going from top to bottom. Adam Scott. and Henrik Stenson are 11,700 and 11,100 respectively. I think they're both going to have really high ownership, and a lot of people like them. And it kind of frustrates me a little bit because I wish I was jumping all over some guy that maybe everybody else wasn't. That's an expensive play, but I do think those are the two best players. They are going to be heavily owned in GPPs, though. I'm telling you right now, especially Adam Scott. I think just because he's had 2 wins in Florida already. I would be a little bit. They almost won at the Northern Trust Open as well, so it's going to be tough, as far as the GPPs go. But they're both in great form and playing well right now. Justin Rose at 10,500. I love him just as much, and I don't think his ownership will be as good. And his ownership usually isn't that. It's always good, but it's never, way up there. And Justin is playing fantastic golf. He's been playing a little bit more in the United States and less on the European Tour this winter, which I really like as well. And so Rose is good. Moving on down to the $9,000 level, Matt Kuchar, Mr. Consistency. If you want somebody that's going to make the cut, he is it. And I think he's got more upside than people are giving him credit for. I think people kind of forget how good Kuchar really can be. And again, this isn't that strong of a field depth-wise. And Kuchar's been playing in some more stronger fields, generally speaking, this year. So I would actually, I wouldn't just say rule Kuchar out from a win. So I would be fine with using him in all formats. Kevin Kisner, 8,900, is a good fit for this golf course. I think people have kind of forgotten about him a little bit. He was a lot more expensive earlier on. But Kisner, somebody that lost in the playoff to Ricky Fowler at the Players' Championship last year, a Florida course. And Kisner, good Southeast, good Florida player. I think he's a little bit under the radar. I certainly like him a lot. Zach Johnson, 8,400, usually a good Florida player. He's a good fit for this, a little bit more of an accurate, shorter hitter. He's not having the greatest year in the world, but at 8,400, I think it's a steal. That's really good value. KJ Choi at 7,700. I think you're getting good value here. Choi has been really consistent this year, and I think he has good upside, and he's definitely got top 10 potential. Billy Horschel at 7,700. He's a decent fit for this course, and he's had a decent year, but he played at Florida, and he knows Bay Hill really well. And I do think that is actually something that could come into play here. Horschel's usually a lot better at the Florida courses, generally speaking. William McGirt, great fit, great stats. And he's a good Southeast player in general. I think you're going to get low ownership from him because not many people know about him. I do think McGirt is really good, 7,700. All right, Kevin Streelman, 7,400. That did not work out last week. That really shocked me. But I do think last week was really weird, generally speaking, because of what the wind was doing. It was there were a lot of curveballs last week, and it was really difficult for the DFS field in general. I'm expecting a great bounce back from Streelman. Again, he has great fit and great stats. I'm kind of calling last week a little bit of a fluke for some of the guys, maybe some of the shorter hitters that struggled in the wind in particular, that had these long shots of 220 yards with the wind blowing all over the place and everything. So in any case, Streelman, I think he'll have low ownership after last week. Speed this up here a little bit. For Ches Rive, 7,200. Good fit, good stats, playing well as of late. Ernie Els, really good bet at $7,000 for making the cut. And especially against a kind of a weakish field a little bit. I think 7,000. Els, if this were a major and Els was 7,000, I would say that's perfectly reasonable, and I probably wouldn't like him as much. But against this field at 7K, I think you're getting a pretty darn good bargain. Low ownership, I would kind of expect as well because there's so many golfers at this price range. Camilo Villegas at 6,700. Good odds per dollar on our odds per dollar tab. He played at Florida, and he has good Florida history. We like that about him, and he's playing well in Florida this year as well. Vijay Singh has made 21 of 22 cuts this year. I know Singh's going to, is falling off a little bit, but that is really nice to look at. 6,600 and a good Florida player, generally speaking, so I'm all right with that. Brett Stegmeyer, continuing to ride him at 6,500. Pretty good stats, pretty good fit, played golf at Florida, and usually pretty good at the Florida courses, generally speaking. Robert Streb, 6,500, good odds per dollar, underpriced. Colton Knox at 6,300. He's got a good fit for this course, solid stats, and good form. He got a little bit unlucky last week, I think, with some of the putting from what I had watched. Fabian Gomez at 6,300. Good fit, good stats for this golf course. Stuart Sink, again, he was a guy that fell off last week, kind of out of nowhere. But I'm expecting him to bounce back again. He's kind of in the Streelman category for me here. Good fit, good Florida Southeast type player. Chad Campbell at 6,000. He has surprisingly really good numbers, considering kind of where his price is at and some of the results he's had. But he's got really good stats for this course, despite some recent struggles. And he's made 13 of 13 cuts historically playing here. That's really good. Jonathan Vegas at 6,000. He has no business being this cheap. He's just a better player than that. He's a little bit more GPP-ish because he is a little bit up and down, but he is definitely somebody at $6,000 in GPP. I have 100% okay with you throwing him in there. And lastly, Tony Finau at 5,900. He has no business being that cheap. I know he hasn't played that well as of late, and he's not the greatest fit. But again, we can be more aggressive, and Finau has great upside, so I would not be afraid to do Finau as well. So that is it for my top picks, and those will be on the forum along with the B list. As far as some other guys that you could maybe want to consider include. So that is it. Just a note: next week we are off. No golf video or no golf preview video next week, I should say, because it is the match play and there's no DFS for the match play. We'll be back for the Houston tournament in 2 weeks. And then we got the Masters. I'm hoping that next week is a very busy week for me, and I'm hoping I can do maybe a strategy video or two next week. But if I can't, or either way, I should say, we will be having more strategy videos and more frequent material as we build up toward the Masters and kind of as March Madness dies down. I've been pretty heavily involved with that in some other areas, and so I'll be a little bit more focused on golf. And even with baseball starting up, we got Danny and Max helping us out with that, obviously. And really taking a good role with that. And so they'll be kind of maybe driving that more, and I'll be getting more prepped for the Masters as we get closer to that. And so, maybe we'll be able to even do a Twitch stream there where we can interact in the chat and stuff like that, and do some things of that nature. And hopefully we can get some winners out there for the Millionaire Maker with some of our help. So in any case, that is it. Please, if you continue to like our stuff, please like and subscribe to our Twitch and YouTube channels. We always like that. And then, of course, my tweeting will become less frequent about March Madness as it has been recently, and it will be more about daily fantasy golf. So in case you were wondering, wait, is this guy, what the heck, I thought I was following a golf guy. I do tweet about a lot of different things. It's been a lot more college basketball oriented, but we're going to gear more toward golf as March Madness is dying down here. We'll die down here shortly as we build up toward the Masters. So hang in there, but if you'd like to follow me now or wait until the March Madness stuff dies down, you can follow me at Nick Juskewycz, and of course you can always follow Daily Fantasy Winners at DFantasyWinners. All right, guys, thanks. Good luck.